Are you this meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Are you all on my YouTube channel that you can maybe check to see if I'm actually streaming?
Check.
I'll get there. I don't know. We'll see. Hey, it's not working. Great. Maybe it is. Oh, it is working. Oh, there it is. All right, let's officially start then. So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Risk. Here today with us is Martin and Emily from Tech ID Manager. Martin, I'll let you take a second to introduce yourself.
Martin White. I'm the owner and founder of Ruffian Software. Our product is called Tech ID Manager. I worked in MSP space for many years. I saw
it is working. Oh, there it is. Wow. Look at that. Sorry.
Live delayed echo. I love it. I started Ruffian Software to specifically address a problem I saw in the MSP space.
Nice. Emily?
I'm Emily, and I am the engagement manager for Ruffian Software. I'm sure you've seen me out in social media talking about Tech ID Manager.
Nice. I'm going to go and see if I can put this on LinkedIn real quick. And they aren't Martin. Boom. Join us live. Post. Done. Gone. Yay. Now we're on both. All right, let's just wing it and see where we go. So today's conversation, a little bit about, well, Emily, you're going to keep us on track. You're going to pretend to be our moderator.
That's right.
You, Martin and I are going to go off script. So,
all right, so let's go with the $1 million question. Do you think the MSP industry will stay less regulated than a barber?
So I'm going to let Martin. I have some. Yeah. I'm going to be a little controversial. Yeah, Martin, you go first.
Okay.
I think that the MSP space is not going to stay less regulated than a barber. Last time I went to a barber was many years ago, but they had regulations. I know that friends that, where's the hat? I think that similar to my analogy, I love the parallel is the engineering space. Engineers 100 years ago were not regulated. Anybody that went to college, designed a bridge, it went up. Bridges started falling down. Things started happening. Then the PE Society, Professional Engineers Society came in. They set up some regulations. They got ahead of legislation. And then now legislation followed what the Professional Engineering Society said. And all people that build civil structures have to have a PE stamp. People in mechanical engineering that sell things that are pressure vessels have to have a PE stamp. That PE stamp is very important to that whole engineering infrastructure. And the regulations around it are pretty serious.
Yeah. So you make a good analogy there, right? So, the things about the physical stuff, right? So Emily, when you asked like more regulated than a barber, right? So when I think about a barber, like he's got sharp knives, right? He's got like these straight razors, right? He can literally cut my head off, right? And so, yeah, I can see why there's a sanitary aspect. There's a lot of things of like making that analogy towards a barber and cybersecurity regulations, because he could literally kill you, right? Or infect you or something, right? So I get that, but take it a step further, like manicurists, maybe, but Martin, you make a really good analogy there. I kind of like back up a step, right? And I wrote a blog article about this. I look at like the regulations more like referees in football, right? So you watch football. I'm huge New England fan. Go Patriots, right? Hopefully they're going to get a little better this year, but let me tell you, their new starting quarterback is doing great. Anyways, there are rules, right, in which football players and teams need to adhere to, and then they have these compliance people like Martin and myself that like help understand and make sure we all follow these rules, right? You definitely don't want helmet to helmet, concussion, bad stuff, throw a flag, right? So I look at it like, yes, a barber regulated because he can literally cut my head off, right? Football, yeah, like concussions are a thing, but in compliance and cybersecurity for a small business, the reality is the risk, You know, when we look at the barber cutting our head off, slicing our thing, whatever, right? There's risk, right? The engineering that you made, like there's risk, right? Football, there's risk. Same kind of thing applies to businesses, right? If you're not, I mean, we'll get into this, but if you're sharing passwords, that's risky, right? If you have bad passwords, that's risky, right? And it's really all around managing that risk. So whether it's regulated or not, I think they should be. And I think because people need to have that sort of rules and regulations to kind of know the benchmark that we want, like that we need to attain to, right?
Yeah, I think that the regulations are one type of benchmark. I think that the cybersecurity compliance frameworks that are out there, all of them, any one of them is a good set of regulations, set of guidelines to go toward. And then the auditing for those cybersecurity compliances are like the referees. They say, well, you're supposed to do all these things. These are the rules. You did these, you didn't do these. You should get better at this. Here's a flag, here's a fine. HIPAA specifically has fines when you break their rules. You know, so like, do you think they are going to be regulated, or do you think they're not going to be regulated?
Well, you know, let's just pick on CMMC here for a minute,
Mhm.
right? Because everybody's talking CMMC, everybody's talking that, like, and we know it's kind of Wild West still in rulemaking, but you know, here's the thing. An MSP, an IT service provider, like has access and has the ability to get into corporate data, right? And the CMMC program is all about protecting that CUI, you know, keeping our national security and the risk around that, right? And so there's all the conversations in scope, out of scope, in scope, out of scope, full scope, FedRAMP, whatever. But as an MSP, like I have access to your data. That means I'm in scope. If you start to look at the assessment guidelines, if you start to look at the regulations and the rules, yeah, I'm in scope. So that means now I have to adhere to stuff, right? So that means I'm now regulated. You know, there are other pieces of the industry like CompTIA, like the National Society IT Service Providers with Carl, right? There are pieces of the industry that are trying to help, you know, bring this sort of more focus to MSPs. Me personally, yeah, I think they should be. I only say that because as my MSP, when I was running my MSP, we were getting, you know, assessed against FedRAMP moderate all the time. Find an MSP that is FedRAMP moderate authorized, you know, to do work with federal government. I made that decision in 2006 and just kept doing it going forward, seeing the writing on the wall. Current MSPs, yeah, you're going to have to play a little catch up, but I do think that they are going to be regulated at some point. In fact, there's even laws working through Congress and the House right now that define a managed service provider beyond the CSP, cloud service provider. There's actually language sitting in front of the legislators that use the word MSP, managed service provider.
Yeah. At the end of 2021, there were 21 states that had passed laws that directly affected MSPs and had requirements on what they do and how they do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of regulations.
Yeah, I mean, let's not even talk about like the privacy stuff, right? What's there 40, what was my last count? 42, 43 individual states that have privacy laws. And as an MSP, you have access to that data, right? It applies.
Yeah. And HIPAA applies to so much more data than people think it applies to.
Yeah. You know, the HIPAA, I love that. I love and hate it, right? Everybody says, you know, it's hard to enforce because there's no regulatory body, blah, blah, blah. There's always like, but NIST just put out, 2-3 months ago, comment for new HIPAA regulations coming. So stuff's changing. The industry's moving. Compliance is going away.
Something I see very often in social media is the talk of cyber insurance.
Yeah, good question.
Do you think that cyber insurance will adopt one of the frameworks, or at least pull more specific pieces from those frameworks as time goes by to try to mitigate their risk?
Great question. So we had Wes Spencer on not too long ago, and Connor, Wes from Fifth Wall and Connor from Finn, literally talking about this not too long ago. You can see it on our YouTube channel, and I have to be very careful of how I word this. So let's just say that the insurance industry is driving change, right? And that change is going to dictate how MSPs work and how they work with their clients, right? Now, I can't really talk about insurance because I'm not a broker and I don't have the licenses and the stuff around that. But what I can say and what I have seen in the industry is, right now, insurance industry is asking for 5 key things. Those 5 key things relate to almost any risk management framework, right? Are they specific to one framework? No, but they're also just good business practices, right? Have backups, have security training. Like, you can get the list on our YouTube. I don't need to rattle it off for the millionth time. But to answer your question directly, I think that there is a specific framework that insurance companies will start to adhere to, but expand on, right? What I think that is most likely surrounding the CIS controls. If you're not familiar with the CIS, there's Center for Internet Security. Google, we can talk about that after. Martin, what do you think?
I think that the insurance industry has been caught with their proverbial pants down. I think that they did not understand what cyber insurance was, and they are quickly learning. I think that they are looking at the actual things that have gone wrong and the risks associated with those things. And as they have to pay out more, they're going to put specific controls in place to address the things that they're having to pay out for. Does this mean that they adopt some cybersecurity framework, or they say you have to be CMMC or SOC 2 compliant in some way as an MSP? I actually don't think that they're going to do that. I think that they're going to be more along the lines of an actuary that says, these have been the risk points. These are the things you need to address. However you address them is fine. If you meet one of these security frameworks, it then maps into meeting these actuarial points that we have.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think that's what they're learning via spending money, and they don't want to spend money.
Exactly. Well, you make a good point. Actuary tables. Again, I am not a cyber insurance person or insurance person whatsoever, but actuary tables are what the insurance industry uses to be able to dictate and understand their risk. And they have that data for, humans driving vehicles. They have that data for, home burglaries in, bad areas or good areas. Like, they have these actuary tables where they can literally define the risk value. They don't have that for cyber, right? This is emerging, right? This is growing. And so
they're garnering those tables with every incident.
But it will come. That data will come. It'll take time, but it will come. Things like AI and machine learning and stuff like that will be helpful. As an MSP, listen, you've heard me say it, you've heard our friend Matt Lee say it, I'm sure Martin said it too, like, start building your defensibility, right? Start building something, anything. Pick CIS. Like, CIS is great because it's iterative. There's 3 groups. Start on group 1 and literally control 1, control 2. And if you need help, come ask us. Come ask Martin. The community is large enough that we want to share this knowledge. It is literally my life goal, is to take the crap that I've learned in 17 years in my brain and help the next generation around it. So yeah, I think CIS is going to be a good starting point for small businesses, and definitely MSPs trying to figure this out.
Yep. I want to throw out there, I'm not an insurance broker either. These are all my opinions. Don't take them. Take them for what they are. I think that CIS, CMMC, SOC 2, any of this cybersecurity frameworks will get you pretty far. And there are even companies that have cross maps that will help you implement any one of the frameworks, Just pick one.
Nice.
Along that same topic, I'm also seeing a pretty big scramble for the MSPs to get MFA to check that box in these cyber insurance policies. There's a lot of assumptions that come behind that MFA that they're checking that box for. So just by implementing the MFA, are they doing it the way they should, being that they have so many unrelated domains?
Yeah, I don't know. Martin, how do you enable MFA on your dumb switch?
You replace that dumb switch and you tie it to some authentication, some central authentication source.
Oh, wait,
That-
those exist?
Yes.
Hmm.
Everything from like mid-level up on switches and routers. Yeah. It's one of my big pet peeves that the built-in authentication mechanisms on the switches, routers, cameras, all that kind of low-level network hardware stuff has been a serious point of breach for many, many networks.
Yeah, so
Get rid of
I'll have a little anecdotal story, right? So conducting physical security assessments of organizations. I won't tell you who, but I will tell you the how and the what, right? One of the things that I used to like to do now, before COVID, when we were actually going into buildings and stuff, now that's starting to happen again, was there's actually a word for it now. There wasn't probably 5 years ago, maybe there wasn't, I just didn't know it, but walking into a building, into a client that I'm doing an SRA, some kind of risk assessment on, some kind of physical assessment on, and just walking over to a network jack and plugging in, well, nowadays they call them pineapples, plugging in a device, seeing what I can find. Right. Part of my job is to find vulnerabilities. Part of my, like, we have the NDAs, we have the stuff in place to make sure I'm doing it ethically. But you'd be surprised at how many, buildings, how many network architects in their build, like they don't have, like, you can literally plug in and find everything on their network in seconds.
Very similarly, when I worked at an MSP, part of my job was to run the backups, which meant I had to go swap out drives in servers, hard backup stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was a curiosity of mine. I would walk in without a company shirt on because I just wore button-up shirts and ties, sometimes ties, and would walk up to the secretary or the front desk person at doctors and dentist practices and say, "Hey, I'm in the IT company. I need to swap out this drive on your server. Can you take me to your server?" Only one time in 3 years of doing that did somebody try to confirm who I was. Everybody else just stood up and walked me back to this closet where the server was and let me plug in whatever I wanted into their server.
Yeah, seen it happen all the time. Social engineering. So, a previous employer almost 20 years ago now, say similar kind of thing. Wasn't us doing pen testing or pen testing, I'll use that word lightly, wasn't us doing some physical assessment, was actually some competitor in the space that sent somebody into the building to try to steal intellectual property. And they walked in with a shirt that said Dell on it, right? They bought a shirt probably from Goodwill or whatever that said Dell on it, walked in and had the conversation with the receptionist. "Hey, I know Johnny's on vacation. He's having a great time in Florida. I know he won't be back, but there was a problem with the server. He wanted you to let me in there to go deal with it." Well, fortunately, the IT staff, and Johnny was the CEO, and Johnny had his out of office message on. And Johnny said, "I'm currently enjoying my time in Florida. If you need something, call Jack." Like literally out of it, like I don't do out of office messages ever, right? Because of this situation. That human was able to, just from the out of office message, social engineer the receptionist with Johnny, yep, got the right name. Oh yeah, Johnny in Florida, yep, got the right location. Like Dell shirt kind of looks legit, right? That's so even taking it like away from 2FA and backing it all the way up, like even things like an out of office message can open you up to these social engineering things. Fortunately, we were in the server room doing work, and when he walked in, I was like, "Who are you?" So, yeah.
Very fortunate.
Yeah, because we had swapped out the server room door with a thumbprint biometric, and she couldn't get in, he couldn't get in, but when we heard them fumbling, and I opened the door, and I was like, "Who are you?" Yeah, it would have been really disastrous.
Yeah, people just don't. It's like fishing, but in person, they just don't expect it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Emily, what else do you have? What else can you throw at us that we haven't answered already?
What do you think is the next big requirement coming for cyber policies? You kind of touched on it a little with how HIPAA is going to be changing.
I think both Martin and I have completely separate, similar answers. Martin, you go first.
Next big thing coming is they're going to get more specific. It's going to get more invasive. I talked to somebody from an insurance company a couple months ago, and they said they're developing a little agent that runs on each computer. And if you want their cyber insurance, you have to run this agent on the computer, and it does all this scanning and stuff. Yeah,
like Geico for my car.
Yep. Like if you could pay one rate, or you could install this agent and pay a lower rate, like the smart app for your phone and your car, all those things. I think that they're going to be much more specific in what they asked for.
That's really interesting. Like I love the idea, but I hate the idea. And I hate the idea because as an MSP, we are already dealing with agent bloat and agent overhead and agent, like, how many agents do I manage? Okay, so endpoint, passwords, RMM, remote connect, anybody, what are we at? Like probably on average, probably 8 or 10 agents installed on a machine.
Mhm.
Now what that does, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a good idea. Like now I have to buy machines with a minimum of 16 gigs of RAM and multiple core processors and larger hard drives, right? It just keeps driving that stuff up. You know what, Martin, you and I need to build one agent that all the other agents can talk to. Done. Right? Right? Just API that whole thing, right? We should build that. So to answer your question, Emily, what do I think the next thing is in cybersecurity? Well, I agree that more scrutiny, and I think the problem with compliance and cybersecurity is we make it too hard. So I feel like there needs to be some give and take with here's some things that you should be doing, and really just have a process in place. Nobody expects you to come out the door and be like, I am fully cybersecurely 100% protected. Like that's never going to happen. But I'm building that defensibility. I'm building resilience in my business and in my client's business to protect myself and protect my clients and their customers' data and systems, right? Building that resistance. So how do we get there? What's my answer, Emily? You know what I'm going to say. So for us at Compliance Risk, it starts with good documentation, right? It's not written down. It doesn't exist. But yet you're still held accountable, right? So for us, it's that documentation and having those people and the process in place. And once you have that people in process, then you pull in Tech ID Manager as some of the tools to manage that stuff, right? People, process, tech. We talk about this in the IT space ad nauseam, right? So for me, find the right people. Yeah, that's a task that no one's solved for yet. Right, 700 plus thousand cybersecurity jobs with got to have 1 million years experience to get into it. But the process, at least in the documentation piece, and at least in this case too, the identity access management piece, there are things that can help with that process. There are tools like Tech ID Manager, like Polygon.
Yeah, I think that along the same lines, you have to have process and documentation, and then you have to automate virus protection. You can't have somebody sitting at the computer watching for stuff to come up and click on it. You have to automate as much as possible, especially as an MSP if you want to scale.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, the number of technicians times number of places you service, you just can't do stuff manually anymore. Automation is required.
Exactly. I think automation is extremely important to a point, right? At some point, you're going to get something that no ML at the moment, machine learning, or no AI, artificial intelligence, is going to be able to interpret yet. I mean, once we get there, then we're like Terminator, and what doesn't really matter at that point. But Automation, I think, is very important because it reduces time, but and some of that can obviously reduce risk, right? That whole security orchestration, right? You hear this term, this SOAR term, right? Nowadays, right? The security orchestration tools like Tech ID Manager, tools like Polygon can help in some of that automation. I think that's great, you know.
The AI and ML are pretty interesting. I've written a bunch of genetic algorithms for solving problems,
Yeah.
which is a type of machine learning. That technology as a whole, in my opinion, is a ways from solving the security issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to solve the human problem first, right?
Yeah.
I always say this, like a computer is going to do what a human tells it to do. Graded AI, ML, yeah, whatever, like throw that aside. But if I tell my computer with my mouse to click this thing, it's going to click this thing. Right? Because I said with Mr. Mousy here, scroll over and click, right?
Yep.
So until we can educate and grow and keep humans less vulnerable, we're trying to solve a human problem to a technology challenge. And that, you know, that's why we have things like FinSecurity doing human vulnerability management. That's why we have these things to try to remove pieces of the human element, but also educate around, hey, don't be clicking stuff. Hey, you know, that one of the things I learned in my public speaking class years ago was you tell them, then you tell them again, and then you tell them again. And maybe after the 15th time, they start to hear it.
Yeah. That doing stuff for people, like that's what Tech ID Manager does. Is one of the things we do is we create accounts, we rotate people's passwords automatically every day. We do that manual thing that would take too much time. So they don't do it, and we automate all of that. It's a huge security improvement.
It does. You know, we've had these conversations, like privileged access management is a thing, right? Identity access management is a thing, right? Sharing passwords is, I mean, how many times do we have to tell people not to do it and they just keep doing it, right? So, you know, it's good that, you know, tools like Tech ID Manager are coming into the space to help fix the human problem of stop doing this. All right, if you're not, we're just going to put something in place to make you stop doing it.
Yeah, because every cybersecurity framework, every single one of them says you should never share accounts. Everybody has to have their own account, which is that privileged account management piece that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, they do.
Like I talked to so many MSPs about how they currently do privileged account management. It is mind blowing the insecure way that some people do it. You know, here's my favorite, my absolute favorite. There's an MSP that I talked to. I love those.
YubiKey.
Yeah. There's an MSP that I talked to. He has 900 clients that he services. Not 900 endpoints, 900 clients. He has 70 plus technicians, 75 to 78 technicians. There is one administrative account on each client that all 78 technicians use. The password for that account is in an Excel spreadsheet that everyone has access to via an ODBC connector that puts that on an internal facing web page. So that anytime somebody accesses one of these clients, they go to an internal facing web page, choose the client name, see the administrative username and password, and then they log in.
Yeah, we should talk.
It's
but actually, let's just break that down for a second, right? So they have a process problem, right? They have a people and a process problem, right? So first and foremost, do you have a process? Well, yeah, we spent time building a web page with ODBC. Like, all right, so you threw a developer at some thing to solve the problem, but you didn't solve it necessarily in the best way or the most secure way. And did you actually define the risk and around that? Like, let's back up a step. How do you handle account management? Do you have an account management policy? Yeah, our
Good
account
though.
management policy is go to this internal web page and copy and paste to the username and password. Well, hold on, wait. Ugh. No, start with your people and train them on the policy that says, no, this is how we do it. And we brought in Tech ID Manager to help manage the technology around the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but that's scary.
And it is so common. That was one of the most egregious. But like that mentality around just giving everyone full access everywhere, it's all over the MSP space. It's the Wild West.
It is the Wild West. But fortunately, people like you and I and others in the space are trying to help educate, right? Taking the crap in our brain and teaching the next generation.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of people don't even like what Tech ID Manager does is one piece of a larger problem solution. Polygon does piece, like there's a lot there, but it's a piece a lot of people don't even look at. They're like, oh, we've done this for 30 years. Why should we change?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna poke over here real quick and take a look in chat, see if there's any Q&As. Hey, Tim, Steve, Jonathan, Jason, Eric, thanks for joining us here. If you have any questions, feel free to drop some stuff in chat. If I say something and screw up, please feel free to call me out on chat. If I am not answering a question or you have something, yeah, feel free to drop that in the Q&A section. And, Emily will make sure we don't continue to get off track and make sure you're getting your stuff answered. So, Emily, where are we at next?
Well, I do have a little bit to add about the new policies that are being put in place. I had a meeting earlier today with some coaches that are employed by a cyber insurance company to coach end users and their MSPs so that they are doing the right thing, making sure that MFA is put in place the right way, not just checking the box. And I asked them, I said, what happens when they just check the box and something happens and they say, yeah, MFA is right here, but you were sharing accounts. What happens then? They said, we might pay out the whatever needs to be paid out, but we definitely will not be continuing any more policies with them. But there's also a chance that we won't even pay out for that, which we have seen in the news.
Yeah, I mean, Travelers just did that, right? Specifically talking about MFA and kind of shit. Like Travelers literally just went through all that and denied claims on something that happened in a very similar situation. And you're going to see that, like, insurance companies are in the business of managing risk and they like to keep their money, right? And when they look at a forum that said, yes, we have MFA, and that MFA isn't necessarily everywhere, number one, or in the right places, but yet you're still sharing accounts, like they're going to find a way to not pay. Right, until and this is how they build up those actuary tables we talked about, how they build up that data to really get to a point where they can make insurance, affordable, safe, like do its actual job, just like it does in car insurance or other industries.
Each of those questions on the questionnaire, specifically that MFA question, is like the tip of the iceberg about what that question actually means. Like MFA is meant from like all levels to confirm that a person using the account is the person that should be using that account. That means that that person owns that account. That means that that person is validated, and see, it just keeps going. It means that that person has like control of that account. They have the proper privileges with that account. So like when you check, yes, there's MFA on the privileged accounts, the administrative accounts, you are really agreeing to a whole heck of a big pile of information. That's just the top of the pile that says yes. It's not can you pretzel logic your way into checking yes? And then they're going to pay for this $1 million breach when it happens. That's not what's going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Again, there's still a slight industry problem that we haven't solved for yet. I think things like Tech ID Manager and privileged access management start to bring that forward and help alleviate that. Things like YubiKeys, things like MFA, TTOP, FIDO, all that fun stuff, right? We're moving in that direction. My brain is 15 years down the road, which is everybody should have their own PKI, right? They should have their own private key that only I know, that can't be, breached or ripped apart or figured out, right? And they should be tied into things like privileged identity access management, right? The PAM solutions, right? I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day as I'm looking at building out Polygon, and it's not just my problem. Security training platforms have the same problem, right? There's a lot of these. DocuSign has the same problem. Adobe Sign has the same problem, which is verifying the human that's actually on the keyboards is the actual human that should be doing the thing, right?
Yeah, the Tech ID Manager is actually built on a foundation of a PKI, a
Perfect.
public key infrastructure, so that each technician has their own private key
Mhm.
that only exists on their computer, that only they have access to and they can control. And that key is actually used for the encryption so that we have zero visibility storage on all their credentials.
Right.
There is no level of access or effort you can use in Tech ID's manager's part to break in and steal and see somebody else's credentials.
Right.
It is
and that's a really great benefit, right? Because you're starting to solve one of the biggest challenges in the space is who is the person in front of the screen. You know, I do a lot of federal government work. One of the tools that we use to manage identity in web-based tools is called login.gov. Or ID.me, which is part of login.gov eventually down the road. So, you know, when I went to do some global entry program, right? So I was trying to get my passport and all that stuff set up. So, hey, IT Nation's coming up in 2 weeks. Like, I want to make sure I have my stuff in a row and I kind of want quick access. So I logged in with my login.gov. And what it did was, and this was new in the last couple of months because I usually use it very frequently, is it actually pulled up my webcam. I had to give it permission, pulled up my webcam, took a screenshot of my face, and something behind the scenes matched it up to my driver's license, which I thought was like, that's how we solve the human in front of the keyboard problem. Like, they're doing it over there. So it was really fascinating to me. Like a couple of weeks ago when I saw that happen, I was like, wait, they've changed their process. And now I actually have to be the human with the webcam in front of the device that I'm logging into and match it to a known identity, like my driver's license or passport. That was pretty great. It was pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. There is a continual one-upmanship that's happening with hackers and phishing and like things like that. They step it up, and then faked webcam interfaces, even like UBS or OBS, which can become a virtual webcam, can insert some other feed of information.
Yeah.
It is a definite one-upping competition between identifying and hackers, especially people that want to not be identified, people that want to be identified. It's a huge, huge space.
Yeah.
I love the continual competition that goes on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know I am not going to solve that problem, nor do I want to solve that problem. But, you know, I've said this for decades, and that is, you know, where technology meets the human, where the physical meets the virtual. Like, I've been saying this for decades. There's nothing new on the internet. There's nothing new that hasn't either already been thought of or already done. You know, metaverse, maybe, you know, whatever, sim, maybe, but there's nothing new on the internet that hasn't been around for the last half a decade or so. It's once we start taking that physical and tying it to the virtual is where the next revolution. So you heard that here first. Nothing new on the internet except for when the physical starts to meet the virtual. And I'm not talking like robots and stuff, but yeah, it's sorry, I had a tangent. Emily, you're supposed to keep me on track.
All right, so I know there's a laundry list of things that should be done, but what do you think are the founding areas that an MSP should be focusing on to position them well for what's coming?
Who wants to go first?
Go for it.
So I said in the beginning, like CIS, right? The Center for Information Security has a set of controls, CIS V8, and these controls are iterative, meaning there's 3 groups, IG 1, 2, and 3. literally start at control one, which is where is my crap? Hardware, software inventory. And you kind of walk through this in a linear but iterative progression, right? So when I talk to MSPs all the time under compliance risk, they're like, what do? We don't get it, but we know we need so. So I'm like, let's pull up the IG3, IG1 controls. And we did a full workshop on this in our peer group, right? And we walk through step one, and do this on yourself first, right? You don't have to do this with a client. Like, it's great. You can get a client to pay you to do the work and you can parallel process you and your client, but you should be eating your own dog food, right? We should be doing these things on ourselves regardless because we have access. So start with CIS 8, start with IG1, start with item number 1. Where's your crap? Start figuring it out and iterate through these over time. You're not going to be, secure and compliant on day one. Keep moving that needle, building that defensibility, and building that resilience.
I agree 100%. Pick a cybersecurity framework. Look at a couple of them. Pick one. It doesn't matter which one, in my opinion, and just start working through it. Do one small thing a day, and you will eventually get all the way through it. The first step, like Tim says there, is evaluate yourself. Self-evaluate, look at what you are doing and make sure that it is as secure as possible. If you've ever said something to your client, make sure that you are doing the same thing. If you let them get away with bad practices because you get away with them, or you tell them and you don't, or you do and they don't, do the right things. Pick some cybersecurity framework and just work through it.
So
plan for it to be a multi-year effort too.
I'm going to throw this out there. So those of you that are on chat, I don't know if you that are actually tied into the Zoom, you should be able to like raise your hand or give a thumbs up, or at least put something in the Q&A that you can respond. How many of you actually do cybersecurity awareness training for you and your staff? 1, 2, 3. Tim, Jonathan, maybe they're just not listening. So a little over 50%. All right, let's take your hands down and take the question a step further. How many of you on the call do role-based cybersecurity awareness training? I'm not seeing any hands. And what I mean by that is beyond, here's your password video, watch and check a box. I'm talking like real role-based, go to this 3-hour class, go to this IT Nation Secure and sit in sessions, like take a Udemy course, role-based cybersecurity training. Martin, Emily, do you guys do that?
I do. I watch informational videos on cybersecurity development, specifically development and security issues in development.
Yeah, because you're writing software. So yeah,
Yeah,
I get it.
so like one thing that I got pointed out recently that was a list of 10 common development issues that lead to security holes long term.
Mm-hmm.
We had one of them, so I fixed it. Like there's issues there.
Nice. Yeah. So when you're looking at your MSP and you're looking at where do we go, how do we start, it's all overwhelming. Like we tell our clients they should be doing security awareness training because we want the MRR. Are you doing training on yourself? Yeah, some majority of them here in our session were, right? And that's great. And I commend you for that. Don't tell your clients to go do something you're not willing to do yourself. Right?
Yeah, that's huge.
I actually bought eatyourown.dogfood.tech. And I was pretty much told by the rest of the community, yeah, you can't do that. That's not a good marketing ploy. So, yeah. What else you got for us, Emily?
I think that's it. Besides, tell me about what you have going on, Tim.
Oh, really nothing. Like, I just like to sit on webinars and have conversations. So, yeah, I'll give Martin a chance to just, plug. I know we've been talking a lot about Tech ID Manager. For those that are listening here, Martin, why don't you kind of give us that 1 or 2 minute spiel, kind of like not dumb it down, but kind of give us like, what is it? What do we do? Privileged access management. PAM. Ooh, fun. I know a girl named Pam.
The elevator pitch, as it's called.
Mhm.
Yeah. Every cybersecurity framework says an account should belong to a person, and you should never share accounts. Every person should have their own account, should be uniquely identifiable. Everybody agrees with that. It's been the standard in enterprise, in the government for decades. MSPs are breaking that cybersecurity rule when they access their clients' networks and their clients' infrastructure. They do this because an MSP has some number of technicians. They have 10 technicians, and they have 100 clients. That is 1,000 accounts that they should make, at least 1,000 accounts they should make on their clients' networks, 10 at each of 100 clients for each of their technicians. Each technician should log in as themselves. MFA should go back to that individual technician. That technician should be authenticated. And then all the logs on the client's network say, oh, Tim did this, Martin did this. It's right there in the log file. You only go to one place. It is the fidelity of logs and the traceability and accountability that all these cybersecurity training and frameworks are looking to get. MSPs don't do this because it's making 1,000 accounts. That is too many accounts to make, too many passwords to rotate, even if it takes you 5 minutes to remote in, change your password, write it down, and go to the next client. If you have 100 clients, that's 500 minutes each technician is spending on some set interval to rotate his password. That's just untenable amount of manual effort. So like we talked about earlier, this is a process that should be automated, and that is what Tech ID Manager does. Tech ID Manager automates creating a unique account for each technician on each domain, each Azure tenant, each individual machine, everywhere that a technician needs access from an MSP. Tech ID Manager automates creating an account, automates rotating the password on that account every 24 hours to make it something new. So hash attacks, over-the-shoulder attacks, all the stuff that doesn't get any sort of traction. Automates setting the rights on those accounts so that you really can be least privileged access model across the board. So when a technician that remotes in and should just manage the backup remotes in, that's all he can really do. You're not trusting him with the entire keys to the kingdom. You're only trusting him to do what he should be doing. And it also, when you lose a technician, they leave, they quit, you fire them, you determine they're a bad actor. One button click, you disable all of their accounts across all the unrelated domains and infrastructures, Azure tenants, all that kind of stuff. That is the broad stroke of what Tech ID Manager does. There's a lot of philosophy behind why we wrote it the way we wrote it, and a lot of cybersecurity lines we can point to that say every person needs a unique account everywhere, no exceptions. That's just the way it has to be. Like the MSP space is the only place not doing that. So it's what we're trying to solve.
That's awesome. And it's certainly just the time suck alone, right? So like you said, what, 500 minutes, something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's do the math. Let's like hours, right? So
it's an entire day of billable time spent just on overhead for each technician.
Yeah. And so that gets really unwieldy, right? Things that we can do, like we're technologists, right? You look on my wall right there, it says, if I have to do it more than twice, I'm scripting it. Right? It's just a rule I've lived by for decades. And it's literally on my wall and says, like, I'm not going to turn the webcam around. You get the idea. I should put that behind me and frame it, right? So then I could just be like, anyways, that automation piece, right? That ability to free up time to, MSPs always talk about, we don't have the time to do this. We don't have the resources to do this. Excuse after excuse after excuse. And here's the thing. People like us, like Martin and myself, we're bringing these tools to help alleviate some of those times, but also make you more safe and secure and more defensible and more resilient down the road, right? So it's kind of a double whammy, right? You're getting the, hey, I just saved 500 minutes per technician per day by rotating passwords, by throwing in Tech ID Manager, right? Okay, great. Now you have no excuse. Right now you have a solution to a problem in the industry, right, that we know is a problem in the industry, right? So yeah, I think that's pretty damn cool, and excited to see how that continues to grow for you. For us here at Compliance Risk, it's kind of been an interesting journey. We started, been an MSP, still an MSP, kind of started on that, either Facebook or someplace, LinkedIn, whatever. Someone would throw a compliance question out, I'd throw an answer, and then they'd ask me another one, and then I'd throw another one. And before I'm like, you know what, just book a few minutes. I'll just give you 15 minutes and we'll just talk, right? And I'll just get this out of the way and off my plate in 15 minutes. Yeah, that didn't work out so well because I was basically giving away free advice, a couple days, almost the equivalent of like 2 days a week. Not sustainable. So we built a peer group, right? You can find it at compliancerisk.io. We built a peer group around the teach to fish model, right? Join the peer group. You know what that is. Don't have to belittle, like weekly meetings, private Slack, all kinds of resources on the dashboard when you log in and sign up, like the teach to fish model. Take the stuff that we've been literally having to deal with as an MSP in the compliance space since 2006 and teach you. And that's been growing really well. But what's come out of that is, hey, Tim, we've learned a lot. This is really great. We did CIS. I walked the whole peer group literally week after week after week, CIS IG1, IG2, and IG3, and all the pieces of how to successfully walk through CIS. Wow, great, Tim, learned a lot. Now I have a client with a need. What the hell do I do? Great. We talked about it. So they don't have the bench strength. They don't have the people portion. They may have been learning the process and have some of the technology, but they don't have the people. Great. We come alongside and partner with you as this three-legged stool, like the company, the MSP is the technical implementer, and us working through the compliance stuff. And we fish with you model, right? So we went from teach you to fish to now we fish with you. And that's been going really well. But really, the big thing that I've learned from working with MSPs is how they manage policy, which they don't, right? Martin, you said it. They don't manage even their identity, let alone policy. No one wants to talk policy. Policy is a big, scary thing. You mean I got to write words? Yes, policy is a thing. However, how many MSPs actually have an onboarding process? Offboarding process, password reset process, right? You do these things in your business already. You just don't take the same methodology and apply it to the cyber aspects, the policy aspects. I have a privileged access management policy. I have the people and I have the tool, right? And this process that we're bringing through Polygon. Polygon is our SaaS app, compliancerisk.io/Polygon, or click the big ugly button on the front of my website. By the way, anybody want to do some graphic design work? Polygon is shaping that future of policy management. And we're bringing that, I'll use your word, automation to policy process management by making it easier for MSPs, not only for themselves, NFR for you, use it for yourself for free, use it for your client at a reduced rate right now. Use this process and this SaaS application to manage your documents. Never again will you have to hunt and peck for a Word document. Share it on a SharePoint site. Figure out SharePoint permissions. Heaven forbid, email it insecurely. All of this in our SaaS-based application platform where you can manage that life cycle of those policies. And that's it. We went from teach you to fish to fishing with you. And now we have a boat we can all go fishing in.
Nice.
Yeah. And with that said, we're coming on about 5 minutes before the hour. Emily, do you have more questions?
Oh, I think we did well.
Did we stay on track?
We did.
Did I go off the rails too much?
No, it was perfect.
So let's end on one final note. I already shared my nugget, and maybe you don't have a nugget, but what is one sort of phrase, favorite saying, like words to live by? Emily, do you have one of those, like, oh my gosh, I look at and I always think to myself, write once, use many, or whatever? You have a favorite quote, favorite saying, favorite thing?
If you fail, try again.
Ah, that's a good one. There's a good one. Yeah, because I've failed way too many times. Keep trying. What about you, Martin?
I have two favorite sayings. One is earn your playtime,
Mm,
and the other is free men don't ask permission.
Tell me about that one.
Yeah. It says a lot about me as a person and the way that I choose to live life. I am much more about the ethical and philosophical interactions between people and how they should be. Where my rights end are where your rights start. And as a free man, I am going to go do something, and then I don't have to ask permission because I am free. I have self-aware, I have all these other things in place.
Yeah.
And then I have thought enough about it that I know my rights end where your rights start and your rights end where my rights start. And that can apply to all types of things. It applies a lot to the way I do business, applies a lot to the way that I interact with employees, with other vendors, things like that.
That's awesome. That's, I'm going to, we still have a few minutes here. I'm going to share a little anecdotal story again, because, I like to share and stories are fun. But, you kind of reminded me something about like our rights, right? And so prior to compliance risk, I used to be known, and our organization used to be known as the compliancy guy. So just let that sit for a second. The compliancy guys. So one of my largest clients on my MSP, I love them. I've learned so much from them. They literally say right on their homepage of their website is like, we're a queer-led organization, which is awesome. And what I've learned working with them so closely over the last several years is this whole idea about identity of self. Now, whether you agree, don't agree, or whatever, I personally learned like, 50-year-old white guy, I'm probably part of the problem. For whatever reason, I'm in New England, like the whole 9 yards, right? And so I really started to learn about, like stuff means stuff to people, right? And I'm certainly not the most politically correct person, but what I did recognize is when I'm calling my company the guys, I am literally alienating half of the population physically. Like, yes, not like the whole identity of self, but at least physically. Yes. And so it really got me thinking, like, that's not who I want to be as a person. Like, who I want to be as a person is to be able to like have open and honest relationships and connecting with people and not alienate them by using a term that's at this point in time kind of politically incorrect. And so I rebranded. I threw everything out and I started over last January under compliance risk because I just learned that I don't want to be that guy. Even though I'm not, I don't want to have that perception of being that guy. And I don't know if I've actually shared this story publicly now on YouTube. Shit, well, here I am live. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I think your philosophy is a really good one. And, I come from personal experience that I've been learning and growing in those spaces as well. So yeah, you can beat me up after I hit the stop record button, but yeah, I think it's important. And I will leave you with my favorite phrase, which I already told you, which is if it's not written, well, that's the other one. If I have to do it more than twice, script it.
Yep.
Right. If I have to do it more than twice, script it. So let me just go ahead and say thank you everybody for coming to hear us banter a little bit about will cybersecurity be more regulated than a haircut? Hopefully. And and we've had some good conversation. This is obviously on our YouTube channel now. So if I do say go to compliance risk /YouTube, you're kind of already there because you're kind of watching it there. So I'm Tim Golden from Compliance Risk. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Emily. Let me go ahead and hit the